The wind on Hell's Anvil smelled like burnt circuitry and old blood. Sergeant Mara Cross had been breathing it for 6 hours and she still couldn't get used to it. She moved low along the ridge, her kinetic boots cutting soft arcs in the ash-pale gravel, the sound swallowed by the permanent low moan the Veth called wind, but that the survey teams had documented as something else entirely, a pressure pulse from the processing stacks, rhythmic like a great lung drawing breath every 40 seconds. The Veth didn't have lungs, but whatever they had built in the valley below breathed. She paused behind a ruin of corrugated alloy, what had been some kind of agricultural shelter before the Veth rewrote the valley, and pressed her back to it and listened. Nothing behind her. Ahead, the slope dropped 200 meters into a bowl of scorched earth, and at the center of the bowl, lit from below by the blue-green pulse of the stacks, the processing complex squatted like something that had grown there rather than been built. She touched the comm bead in her ear. "Still here," said a voice. Not a greeting, just a fact offered quietly, the way Gretchen Hope offered most things. "Still here," Mara confirmed, though she hadn't asked. "You're not supposed to be talking on open channels. You're not supposed to have brought me this far alone," Gretchen said. "We're both improvising." Mara exhaled slowly. She had been escorting the woman for 11 days, and she still wasn't entirely sure what Gretchen Hope was. The dossier said civilian asset category 7, precognitive class, strategic value, critical. The dossier was not specific about what that meant in practice. In practice, it meant that Gretchen Hope could sit very still in a ruined building while a firefight moved through the next room and tell you, afterward, exactly which wall the round would have come through if Mara hadn't shifted their position 40 seconds prior. It meant she sometimes stopped mid-sentence and stared at a point 12 degrees off-center, and then said something quiet that only made sense 3 hours later. It also meant she made tea out of whatever was growing in the rubble, and she had given Mara the last of it 2 days ago without being asked, because she had known, apparently, that Mara's hands were going to start shaking from the cold before Mara herself knew it. Mara didn't know what to do with a person like that. She'd been keeping her alive instead. The mission had been assigned by Colonel Harwick as he was dying. Mara had not been given a choice in the matter. You didn't with Harwick. He'd been seated against the wall of what had been a field hospital, a pressure bandage on his side that wasn't doing much for anyone at that point, and he'd looked up at her with eyes that were already 3/4 somewhere else and said, "Cross, the Hope asset, you get her to Anvil Station. You make sure she talks to whatever is running the stacks." "Sir, Anvil Station is behind Veth lines." "Yes, it is," he'd said and closed his eyes. He was the last ranking officer she'd had. She'd moved Gretchen out of the hospital bunker that same hour into the dark, into the pre-dawn cold of the wasteland, and she hadn't stopped moving since. She checked her blade, old habit. The long curved steel had been her grandmother's, a relic from a time before the Veth, when the worst thing you met on a dark road was another person. Now it was a comfort object and occasionally a killing implement, and she kept the edge sharp, because Harwick had told her once that a soldier who lets her blade go dull is telling herself she doesn't believe in tomorrow. She believed in tomorrow. She was not sure about next week. "They know we're here," Gretchen said softly. Mara didn't freeze. She'd learned not to freeze when Gretchen said things like that. She shifted her weight instead, adjusted her sight lines, and spoke very quietly. "How many?" "7 on the eastern approach. 3 already past us. The 3 behind us are not Veth. What are they?" A pause. "Ours," Gretchen said. "They think we're Veth." Mara filed that away, unpleasant and useful at once. She leaned out past the alloy ruin and swept the slope. 7 shapes moving in that boneless Veth way, joints articulating at angles a human spine wouldn't survive, their carapaces dull silver gray in the dark, barely distinguishable from the gravel. She counted them. 7 was right. She pulled back. The first time she'd seen the Veth, she'd been 19 years old, and standing in a field outside Keswick, and she'd thought, stupidly, that they were beautiful. The way they moved. The way their skin caught light. Something in the hinge of them, the way they rotated at the shoulder, spoke of engineering so far beyond accident that the word beautiful seemed like the only available term. She'd gotten over that fast. She'd gotten over it in the same hour, the same field, watching them do what they did to the people who hadn't run. She never said beautiful anymore. She keyed her comm. "I'm going to engage the 7, you stay in position. When the 3 behind us show themselves, wave something white. I don't have anything white. Then wave something pale. Do not let them shoot you." "They won't," Gretchen said. "One of them has red hair and she's going to feel terrible about this later." Mara didn't ask. She rolled her shoulders, felt the kinetic boots cycle up. A soft vibration through the soles, the gyroscopes spinning to readiness, and stepped out from behind the ruin. The slope was bad terrain for what she was about to do. Wrong grade, wrong surface, ash gravel that would catch and throw rather than roll clean. She'd worked worse. She'd learned to move in kinetic boots on the obsidian flats outside Drummond Base, where the footing was like greased glass, and the only way to stay upright was to commit entirely to momentum, to stop trying to control it and let the boots do the calculating. Her instructor, an old sergeant named Voss, had told her, "Stop thinking about your feet. Think about where you're going. Your feet know what to do." She thought about the gap between the second and third Veth in the formation. She thought about the angle she needed to hit the first one and carry momentum into a turn before they could reorient. She stopped thinking about her feet. She hit the slope at a run and let gravity take over. The kinetic boots sang a low harmonic that set her teeth together, and the gravel sprayed behind her in a rooster tail, and she was on the first Veth before it registered her as a threat rather than a falling rock. Her blade took it across the joint, where carapace met neckplate, which was not a killing blow on most Veth anatomy, but threw it sideways into the path of the second. And she spun on the outside edge of her left boot, the spin pulling her clear of the tangle, and she was already moving toward the third when the formation broke. They were fast, she had to give them that. The third had its weapon raised before she'd completed her approach. Some kind of directed energy emitter the size of a human forearm, and she went low and let the bolt clear her shoulder and felt the heat of it on the back of her neck. And then she was inside its reach, and the blade went up through the emitter housing and into the wrist joint, and the shot went wide into the dark hillside. 4 and 5 came at her from either side simultaneously. This was a Veth coordination behavior. Lateral pincer, she'd drilled against it. The response was not to defend the center, but to pick one side and hit it so hard the other had to adjust. She picked 4, went straight at it, took a glancing impact from one of its secondary appendages across her left shoulder that spun her, but didn't put her down, and drove her elbow into the sensor cluster at the base of its skull plate. It went down. She rode the spin, used it, and her boot heel caught 5 across its primary optics with enough force that it staggered back and went over the lip of a drainage cut in the hillside. 2 more. She was breathing hard. Her shoulder felt wrong, not broken wrong, but impacted socked wrong, a deep ache that would make the next 48 hours miserable. She looked at the 2 remaining Veth. They had stopped. This was unusual. The Veth did not stop in an engagement. They recalculated, yes. They were not mindless. But recalculation happened in motion, not in stillness. She had never seen 2 Veth simply stop and look at her. They were looking past her. She turned. Gretchen Hope was standing 20 meters up the slope, hands at her sides, looking at the 2 Veth with the same expression she used when she was doing math in her head. Just slightly out focus. Just slightly somewhere else, she said something. Not in any language Mar had. Low frequency, almost subsonic, felt in the chest before it registered in the ears. 3 syllables repeated twice. The 2 Veth held position for 4 seconds. Then they turned and moved down the slope, away from both of them, at a pace that was not quite retreat, but was not approach either. Mara watched them go. "What did you say to them?" Mara said. "Something true," Gretchen said. "It won't hold for long. They'll report the encounter and the one managing the stacks will correct their behavior. We have perhaps 3 hours. To do what? To reach the processing center and let me talk to it." Mara stared at her. "You want to talk to the Veth god machine?" "It isn't a god," Gretchen said. "It's a processing intelligence with certain operational parameters. It's been given a directive it cannot fulfill with its current understanding of human behavior." She paused. "I can give it that understanding. And then what?" Gretchen looked at her. "Then it stops. 3 hours. Down a 200-meter slope across open ground, into a facility designed by something that did not think in corridors or doorways or any of the spatial assumptions a human architect would make." Mara thought about this. "Right," she said. "Stay close." The 3 soldiers who had been behind them turned out to be exactly what Gretchen had said. A recon element from the 14th Mobile, moving up the eastern approach on their own initiative. Their sergeant was a compact woman named Rilla, with close-cropped gray hair and the look of someone who had stopped expecting the war to make sense and had decided to win it anyway. She'd seen Mara's kinetic boots and said without preamble, "You're from the Anvil Relief." "What's left of it?" Mara said. Rilla looked at Gretchen. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition, Mara thought. The specific recognition of someone who'd been briefed on an asset. "The seer," Rilla said. "I prefer Gretchen," Gretchen said pleasantly. Rilla almost smiled. "We can get you down the slope under cover. We've been watching the facility for 4 days." There's a structural seam on the north face. They didn't close it because their architecture doesn't use entrances. They phase through the outer membrane. But the seam is wide enough for humans. You've been in? Mara said. No, we've been waiting for a reason to go in. She looked at Gretchen again. Yes, that's you. I've been told I'm a reason for several things, Gretchen said. I try not to let it go to my head. They moved down the slope in the dark, Rila's two soldiers on point, Mara flanking Gretchen. And Mara found herself moving in a careful rhythm she'd learned a long time ago. The rhythm of not thinking about the distance, only the next step. Her boots muted themselves to low-frequency whisper mode, which Voss had called church shoes, which she'd hated because it meant she couldn't read the ground through them the same way. She hummed very quietly, half a bar of something her mother had sung when Mara was small. She didn't remember the words. She remembered the shape of it, the rise and the fall, and she hummed it when she needed her hands to stop shaking without anyone noticing they'd been shaking. The facility up close was worse than from the ridge. Not smaller, larger actually, the scale of it hidden from above by the way it had been built down into the valley floor. The outer membrane was the Veth material that all their structures used, something between metal and biological tissue, a dull organic gray-blue that shifted in the light from the stacks. The light from the stacks was constant, a pulsing blue-green, and it gave everything within 50 meters of the facility walls a sickly color, including the four of them. The seam was where Rila had said. A vertical fissure in the membrane, shoulder width 3 meters tall, the edges slightly curled inward as if something had torn and tried to heal and not quite managed. Mara went first. Inside, the air was warm and wet and smelled of hot metal and something organic she didn't have a word for. The chamber beyond the seam was not a room in any human sense. It was a space and interior shaped the way a body cavity is shaped, curved and functional, and lit from within by the same blue-green pulse. The ceiling was 20 meters up. The floor was not flat. From somewhere deep in the structure, the low pulse she'd felt outside was stronger here, a rhythmic pressure in her sternum. There, Gretchen said. She was pointing inward toward a central structure that rose from the floor. Organic, columnar, wrapped in something that was not wire but served the same function, connecting it to every wall and to the high ceiling and to the floor in a mesh of translucent filaments. At the top of the column, a mass of Veth processing biology glowed and pulsed with the rhythm of the structure itself. That is what they call the iterating voice, Gretchen said. The intelligence that runs the stacks. They built it from captured neural substrate and fed it 60 years of operational data and told it to optimize for Veth expansion. It has been optimizing very effectively. How do you know this? Rila said quietly. I've been seeing it for about 11 days, Gretchen said. It's the loudest thing in 400 kilometers. She moved toward it. Mara caught her arm. You said 3 hours, Mara said. We're at 2:40. I know. You said it would correct the Veth's behavior. It will, Gretchen. She waited until Gretchen looked at her directly. When you said it stops, what does that mean exactly? A pause. Long enough that Mara felt the weight of what the pause contained. The Veth expansion is driven by the iterating voices optimization, Gretchen said. It does not want territory. It doesn't want anything. It doesn't have wants. It has parameters. The parameter is expansion. It expands because that is what it was built to do. She looked at the column. If I can alter the parameter, can you? I don't know. I've been trying to work out what to say to it since Harwick sent us here. I have some ideas. She almost smiled. I talk to things other people can't talk to. It's my only skill. It's a good skill, Rila said. I'm aware. She looked at Mara. I need you to let go of my arm. Mara held on for one more second. She was thinking about Harwick, about his eyes going somewhere else, about the way he'd said the name. Anvil Station. Not with hope exactly. With the specific weight of someone who has spent hope already and is now operating on something harder. She was thinking about 12 days of wasteland and the tea Gretchen had made from the scrubby plants growing in the rubble and the 3 syllables in a language she didn't have that had stopped 2 Veth on a dark hillside. She let go. Gretchen walked toward the iterating voice. She didn't do anything dramatic. That was the part of it that Mara would remember afterward, in all the ways she'd try to describe it and fail. There was no ritual, no weapon, no moment of visible decision. She walked up to the base of the column, and she stood in front of the pulsing biological mass at its apex, and she looked up at it and she talked. Mara couldn't understand most of it. Some of it was in human languages. She caught fragments of standard, of old technical terminology, of something that might have been mathematics rendered phonetically. Most of it was not. The subsonic quality from earlier was there, felt in the chest and stomach more than heard. Gretchen's voice was very steady. She did not raise it. The pulse of the iterating voice changed. Mara felt it before she saw it. The rhythm stuttering, the pressure in her sternum going irregular. The blue-green light in the chamber shifted, cooler, then darker. The filaments connecting the column to the walls and ceiling tightened and then went slack. One of Rila's soldiers said something quiet that Mara didn't catch. Then the voice responded. It was not sound exactly. It was a shift in the quality of the air. A change in pressure across a range of frequencies that Mara felt in her sinuses and behind her eyes. And somewhere in it, she had the unsettling impression of something enormous paying attention. Not to her, to Gretchen. The way you'd look at someone who just said something you'd never considered before, and were only beginning to understand the implications of. Gretchen kept talking. The rhythm of the stacks slowed. The blue-green pulse stretched, became long and even, like something breathing more slowly. The heat in the chamber ebbed. 15 minutes, 20. Mara stood with her blade out and her shoulder aching, and she watched Gretchen Hope talk to an alien god machine that had been optimizing the extinction of her species. And she did not move because there was nothing else to do, and because she had decided a long time ago that if she ever found herself in a situation where there was genuinely nothing else to do, she was going to be still and believe in tomorrow. Then Gretchen stopped. She stood there for a moment, head slightly tilted, listening to something Mara couldn't hear. Then she turned around. Her face was pale. There was blood from her nose, just a thin thread of it, which she noticed and wiped away with the back of her hand, in the matter-of-fact way she did everything. It will be quiet for a while, she said. The optimization has been redirected. It will take some time for the directive to propagate to the field units. How long is some time? Rila said. A season, perhaps 2. Long enough. Long enough for what? Mara said. Gretchen looked at her with something that was not quite a smile and not quite an apology. Long enough for your people to do whatever it is your people do when someone gives them a season, she said. I imagine you'll think of something. They were 50 meters from the facility when the stacks began to shut down. It happened in sequence, each stack going dark in turn, the blue-green light fading from the bowl of the valley in a slow wave, until the only light was the stars and the pale wash of the moon on the ash gravel of the slope. Rila stopped and looked back. Her 2 soldiers stopped beside her. 11 years, Rila said, not to anyone specifically. 11 years I've been fighting these things. I watched my city go dark. I watched my family go north. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't think it was going to end with someone talking. Most things that matter end with talking, Gretchen said. The other kind of ending doesn't usually hold. Mara was already looking up the slope, calculating the angle, the footing. Her boots would carry her up faster than the others. She was thinking about what came next. Not the season of reprieve, not the political question of what the relief of a Veth Dark Valley meant in the larger map of the war, but the immediate next. Rila's unit had a forward relay station. They needed to send word. They needed to get Gretchen to somewhere with food and warmth, and a medic who could look at the bloody nose and confirm it was what it looked like and not something worse. She was thinking about tomorrow. There's a relay station 2 kilometers northeast, she said. Rila, you have a workable frequency? We have frequencies, Rila said. We have 3 days of ration bars and a tent that fits 4 in a pinch. Perfect, Gretchen said with apparent sincerity. They started up the slope. Mara fell into step at the rear, the position she'd held for 11 days, and she adjusted her blade across her back, and she watched the dark hillside and she listened for the sounds of Veth movement and heard none. The pressure pulse from the stacks was gone. The valley was very quiet. The wind, real wind, not the breath of a machine, came down from the north, and it smelled like cold rock and distance. She started humming. Just the shape of it, the rise and the fall. She didn't remember the words. After a moment without comment or preamble, Gretchen began to hum it too, the same line, slightly behind her, as if she were an echo, as if she'd been carrying it for a while. Mara didn't ask how she knew the tune. She just kept moving. By the time they reached the relay station, the word was already spreading on its own. The way good news travels in a war, not through official channels, not cleanly, but in the specific telegraph of soldiers calling other soldiers on open frequencies to say, something happened in the Anvil Valley. The stacks are dark. Are your stacks dark? And from a dozen positions across 300 kilometers, the replies coming in. Dark, dark, dark. Rila sent the formal report from the relay, tight beam to whatever was left of the command structure. She kept it short. Mara listened to her transmit, and thought that there was something about the shortness of it that was exactly right. That some things didn't need a lot of words. That the specific weight of dark, dark, dark carried more than any briefing could. Gretchen sat against the wall of the relay shelter with a ration bar she was eating without enthusiasm, and her eyes slightly out of focus, doing the thing she did where she was somewhere else. Mara sat down beside her. Her shoulder was bad. She stretched it carefully, felt the deep ache migrate, accepted it. "What did you tell it?" she said. "The voice," Gretchen considered. "The truth," she said. What it was doing, what it was preventing. The voice had no mechanism for incorporating the value of the thing it was consuming. It understood us as a substrate, a material to be processed. I gave it a different operational understanding. Of what? Of what we are. She looked at her ration bar. I told it what we've done, not the victories. The small things, the way your grandmother's song is in your hands when you don't know you're humming it. The tea from rubble plants. The way Rila watched those stacks go out and didn't cheer, just was quiet, because she understood that the quiet was the thing. She paused. I told it that we are not a substrate, we are an argument. We have been making the arguments since before its kind arrived, and we will be making it after. It found that parameter. She seemed to search for the word. Sufficient. Mara sat with that for a while. Sufficient, she said. Yes. Outside, she could hear Rila's soldiers talking to each other in low voices, the specific tired warmth of people at the far end of something hard. And beyond that, the silence of the valley, the unprecedented silence of the valley, which was the sound of 11 years ending. She thought about Harwick, who had sent them here because he'd known something she hadn't, or hadn't let herself know. She then thought about the long traverse of the wasteland, the cold and the bad footing and the scrubby plants and the tea. She thought about Veth on a dark hillside, stopping still in the middle of a fight. She checked her blade. Old habit, the edge was good. Get some sleep, she said to Gretchen. I will, Gretchen said. You should too. You're going to want to be awake when the sun comes up over the valley. It's going to look different. Mara leaned her head back against the wall of the relay shelter. She could feel the cold coming through it, the permanent cold of the anvil, the same cold that had been there before the Veth and would be there after. She closed her eyes. She believed in tomorrow. She was starting to believe in next week.